in Kolkata at the moment. It would have been the second oldest, but the oldest, St. Anne's Church, was destroyed in the Battle of Lal Digi. St. Anne's Church stood where the rotunda of Writers' Building stands today. That is where St. Anne's Church was. That was brought down, and so the Armenian Church is the oldest in the city. The oldest Armenian church in Bengal in India is the Armenian church in Chinsura, which I'll come back to later, dates back to 1695. And the marble flooring at the church was funded by Armenians Stephen, again, somebody I'll be coming to shortly. And thanks to this, it was misnamed the Armenian Church of the Holy Nazareth. It has nothing to do with Nazareth. There is no Armenian presence in Nazareth. It's just a little rubbish. It should be the Nazar's Church. And here's a mystery for you. I've deliberately put this slide in. The strange case of the mangoes. It was a popular historian, William Dalrymple. I took him around the church a couple of years ago, and he pointed this out to me. It was under my nose all the time. I never paid attention to it. There are a number of cast iron tombstones at the Armenian church in Barabazar that have mangoes on them. No idea why. Were they mango traders? Did they just love mangoes? At this rate, I'll have a mango on my grave. But we have no idea why. Did they have a monopoly on mangoes, like they had a monopoly on silk? But we don't know what this significance is. And there are a large number of them. It's not just one or two. There are quite a few of them that have mangoes on their graves. Notable graves at the Armenian church. Do visit it if you get a chance. The grave of David Aviad David. So David, we'll come back to him. Founder of the Davidian Girls' School on Royd Street. Archon Stephen, we'll come back to him, but I'm sure many of you have bells ringing with that name. And of course, J.C. Galston, and we'll come to him shortly. And to destroy a myth, my time here would be incomplete if I did not make Dr. Sengupta slightly uncomfortable in his seat. So here it is. It's a common misconception that the grave of Riza Bibi Sarkis at the back of Armenian church is the first Christian grave and the oldest Christian grave in the city. This is a mistake. If you look very carefully at the name, it says the wife of charitable Sukyas. And what's her name? Riza Bibi. What's missing from this is a gap between the two parts, Riza and Bibi. Charitable Sukyas is obviously not his first name either. What we can say with some certainty is that this chap, like many white moguls in India at the time, probably had a number of wives. There is no way Riza Bibi is a Christian, or certainly not an Armenian name. She would have been a Muslim. And since Armenians do not convert, we are Armenian Orthodox, we are older than the Church of England, the Roman Catholics, or most other branches in the world, we do not convert. We do not convert others, we do not accept convertees, which is probably one of the reasons why we managed to thrive here in India. So we can probably safely say she is not a Christian, and we can say with some certainty she is not an Armenian. So if anybody ever points that grave out to you again and says the oldest Christian grave in Calcutta, that would be factually incorrect. No doubt he must have buried his wife there, but it is definitely not a Christian grave. This would be a mistake. My alma mater, the Armenian College and Philanthropic Academy, I believe one of the oldest schools in the city, dating back to 1821. And of course, it has a very, very famous plaque there on the right. It was the birthplace of William Makepeace Thackeray. And yes, this would be the same Thackeray who inspired the Thackeray's of Maharashtra to change their names. So, a couple of bullet points about Armenian College. It was purchased by M.J. Galston, who was the uncle of J.C. Galston, for 48,000 rupees. Then a whole bunch of very wealthy Armenians came together to donate a lot of money. And it originally started as a school for Iranian and Indian Armenians, which is no longer the case, but I won't delve into that. But that's what the purpose was. It has quite a large swimming pool, a gym, a rugby pitch, birthplace of Thackeray. And again, another mythbuster, Free School Street is not named after Armenian College because it's a free school for Armenians, but it's not named after us, unfortunately. It's named after St. Thomas's, which is down the road, closer to Newmarket. We love our paras, paralog, and I would like to think of Park Street as being Armenian para. And here I put forth my argument. Starting towards the top, as you work your way down from Charangi side, you've got Golston Mansions, today known as Queen's Mansions. On the left, you've got Freemasons Hall. J.C. Golston sold the plot to the Freemasons. Stephen Court, coming across to the right where Fleury's is, and the famous Stephen Court fire built by Ayrton Stephen. Jumping back across to the left-hand side, you've got Park Mansions, where there are two European establishments. Who's in there? The French and the Germans. They're both in Park Mansions. Starbucks is in there. Hard Rock Cafe is in there. That was built by Thaddeus. Interesting chap, this Thaddeus. He sets up a trust called the Thaddeus Trust. And in that, he quite clearly says that from the rental income of Park Mansions, every academic year at La Martiniere, 2 Armenian boys and 2 Armenian girls should be educated by the income from rent at Park Mansions. I am very pleased to tell you that it was just a couple of weeks ago that we saw an advert in the Times of India where the board at La Martiniere had taken out an advert reminding people that we have these scholarships, so please come and apply. So I'm really heartened to see that's still going today. And then as you go down Free School Street, you've got Armenian College on the left-hand side, and then Davidian Girls' School on the right-hand side. Golston Mansions, just to give you a quick visual, it's Queen's Mansions as you know it. The name is just here, but if you have a look at old pictures of Queen's Mansions, you'll see it said Golston Mansions, I believe right up to the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Freemasons Hall, Armenian property, Stephen Court. This is just for the convenience of those who haven't seen these buildings. Quick visual aid. Good to see the illegal constructions coming back to Stephen Court after they caused a fire. They're back again. Park Mansions. It was the first to win the joint KMC and INTAC award for best maintained or best refurbished something heritage building, right? So it was the first winner of that. Every building after that has been taken by the wonderful Showman Mitra. Davidian Girls' School, still standing, extensive refurbishment going on at the moment. This is on Royd Street. As you go down, you'll see Jewish Girls' School on your right. Go slightly further down, it's on your left-hand side. Ayrton Stephen. So he's a brother-in-law of J.C. Golston. He marries Golston's sister. And Golston famously loaned him just 40,000 rupees after he built Golston Mansions, Queen's Mansions. So Ayrton asked him for 40,000 rupees. He lent it to him. He never paid it back, and that's relatively minuscule amount for Golston bankrupted him. He was planning on that 40,000 coming back. It never came back, and it led to the downfall of J.C. Golston. As usual, always trust your family to bring you down. So here's a little bit you probably didn't know. The Grand Hotel, I'm sure many of you have been in there. So you've got to like cross the pavement, go in, and it's almost away from the pavement side, right? The original entrance, as long as the Stevens had it, was on Charangi. And as you come in, the entire lobby area was cladded in jade, in pure jade. The stairs, the floors, the pillars, everything was cladded in jade. Why jade? Ayrton's wife, Golston's sister, was of course of Iranian origin, Persian origin, right? What happened to that jade, we do not know. The Oberoi group took over, and we never saw it again. The Charangi entrance was closed, and this funny, strange little side entrance was opened up. It vanished completely. Stephen was also behind a number of other buildings, Stephen Court and Park Street, Stephen House in Dalhousie, Everest Hotel in Darjeeling, and his residence still stands on Kamak Street behind the petrol station. Just to give you a few ideas of what you're looking at, so Grand Hotel there. Down on the right is the current entrance. And something quite sad, actually, this bust of Stephen used to stand in the entrance lobby at the Grand Hotel. until the Oberois took over. And now it's been banished to a balcony up on the first floor, out of sight. Quite sad. And this is the rather shabby Stephen House in Dalhousie Square. J.C. Golston, one of my ancestors, this chap comes across as an orphan from Isfahan, studies at St. Xavier's, and I've got to be honest, doesn't do remarkably well. So he starts work as a jockey at Calcutta Racecourse. Makes a lot of money. He's short. He's some 5'4", just slightly below my height. Maybe his genes still going strong. Don't laugh. He does very well as a jockey. So that money he then plows into buying racehorses. Racehorses did very well. You should read his book. Get onto good old Google and just type in J.C. Golston book PDF. You'll get the PDF of his book. Hard copies are difficult to find. In that book, he writes it himself. He's quite blunt about it. He openly admits to doping his racehorses with steroids and racing them on race days. And he says, well, my objective was to get money, and I needed them to run quickly, so I doped them with steroids. And he famously had a close friend, the last Maharaja of Darbhanga, who would come along to Calcutta Racecourse and see his horses running and winning these races. So the Maharaja of Darbhanga buys 2 horses that he saw winning races. He buys them, and he runs them at a race a couple of weeks later. What happens to the horses? They lose. He then comes and accosts Golston and he tells him, when you ran these horses, they won. I've been running them, they're losing. What's the matter with them? Then Golston told him, well, I've been doping them with steroids. What's the matter with you? Why aren't you doping them? Absolutely, yeah. So the money he makes on racehorses, he then plows into real estate, and then goes on to become probably the largest real estate developer Eastern India, I dare to say, has ever seen. An astonishing 350 buildings were either built by him or passed through his hands at one point or another. 350 buildings. Just to give you a very quick glimpse, Queen's Mansions, of course, Nizam Palace, that was known as Golston Park. And here's a wonderful picture of the Prince of Wales. When he visited Calcutta, he chose to stay with his friend, J.C. Golston, at Nizam Palace. This is a picture of them at the racecourse, but there is a picture of them standing at the balcony, which is at the front of Nizam Palace. In terms of pure wealth, this chap would be the number one. So this is an ancestor of mine from my mum's side, Sir Paul Chaser. Magnificent, magnificent guy. Get onto his wiki and have a quick read before you go to bed tonight. An orphan from Calcutta, he finishes his education at La Martiniere and he's sent to live with his sister in Hong Kong. So he goes out there, studies at La Martiniere, goes out to Hong Kong. He then has a business principle where he says, I never want to own more than 20% of any company. Okay? So he does that. By the end of his life, he has a stake in over 60 companies across Hong Kong. He doesn't stop there. This guy is something short of brilliant. He seed funds HSBC Bank. At one point, my family owned 5% of HSBC worldwide. I am deeply troubled to say I do not own that 5% anymore. We donated it to the Armenian church in Calcutta. Please do not applaud. It was a foolish mistake. And here's his most remarkable achievement. He brings down earth and rocks from the mountains around Hong Kong and expands the size of Hong Kong Island by 57 acres. Reclaims 57 acres of prime real estate in Hong Kong and forms his own developers company, Hong Kong Land, which still exists today, by the way. It's still up and running today. Phenomenal, phenomenal. Sadly, had no children. Could you imagine the wealth they would have had today? 57 acres of real estate in Hong Kong. And then, in the early part of the 20th century, La Martiniere itself was on the verge of bankruptcy. So he donates 11 lakhs. This is in the 20s. He donates 11 lakhs and saves La Martiniere from closure. Otherwise, they would have declared themselves bankrupt, and that would have been the end of La Martiniere. Anybody wanted to read a bit more, type in Paul Chater and Anthony Kashurian into Google. I've written extensively about him in the Times of India. Now, don't go by the name at the bottom of this Admiralty House. This was Paul Chater's residence in Hong Kong. It was called Marble Hall. Sadly, after Chater died, Japanese soldiers had taken it over, and one night some idiot left a hurricane lantern very close to the teak-clad walls, and that set the entire place up in flames. It burned down to the ground. It was known as Marble Hall in Hong Kong. This is a bust of Sir Paul Chater at La Martiniere School, recently unveiled, and they have a bust to him. They have this building named after him, the Chater Building. And for those of you Lamartinians, you'll know that, of course, one Saturday a year is also named after him, Chater Day, whereas they call it Chatter Day. Chater was quite a nice chap, actually. So he was a very, very senior Freemason, and one of the tenets of Freemasonry is doing charitable work. So one thing he really liked was the Sikh langar system, where they give free food, right? Anybody can come, anybody is fed. So in his will, he asked for an old people's home to be built in Park Circus. So there's an Armenian church in Park Circus. The way you would probably be able to figure it out is if you go to the bottom of Lower Circular Road Cemetery and turn right, there's the Armenian Quarter. That then backs on to the Armenian church in Park Circus, St. Gregory's Chapel. So this old people's home is in there. So he asked for an old people's home to be built and funded for all time. And there's a building adjacent to this. They don't allow anybody to go in there because of the elderly people living there. But there is a building at the front, the ground floor of which is a canteen. And the church is they're funded by his trust, they're meant to feed people, but again, due to politics, they don't, sadly. A guy who is Armenian, but repeatedly, if you type his name into Google, you'll find he's been named a Jew and a Greek, because he's buried in Narkaldanga Cemetery, and I'll tell you why. This is Sir Gregory Charles Paul. This is his grave at the Narkaldanga Cemetery. What has he done? Well, he was the longest, till date, he holds the record for being the longest serving Advocate General of Bengal. His education in the United Kingdom, he went to Cambridge, I believe it was. It was funded by Womesh Chandra Banerjee. He paid for him to go out there and study. He treated him like a son, he mentored him. When the High Court or Supreme Court at Calcutta was based in the town hall, a very famous murder took place. The murder of Sir Norman Paxton, who was a judge. He was stabbed to death on the stairs as he came out of the town hall. He was described as an Islamic extremist. Interestingly, the killer's cousin was the chap who killed Lord Mayo in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Two cousins, both of them assassins, both of them managed to take out two key players in the British Raj here in India. Gregory Paul presided over that trial and sentenced the assassin to death. He was ostracized by our community. There were more than 37 millionaires and billionaires, Armenians from Calcutta, who formed these 37 trusts, and they were a management mess. Paul, being a senior lawyer, he merges them all into one mother trust that is overseen by one trust committee, which sits at the Armenian Church in Bara Bazar. For that, because obviously when you've got 37 different dhandas going on, it's much easier to loot than when it's just one. For that, sadly, we punished him when he died by refusing to allow him to be buried at the Armenian plot in Lower Circular Road Cemetery. So he's been banished to Narkaldanga, and which is where he's mistakenly taken for a Jew or a Greek. Before we wrap up, I'm going to leave you with a small thought. We Armenians are very, very proud to claim that we were the first Christian nation on earth. St. Gregory the Illuminator, who has a huge statue behind St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, went to Armenia, converted everybody, and founded the first Christian nation on earth. But it might not have been so. There was a 4th century Armenian historian named Zenob, and he made a series of remarkable notes. He said that 2 gentlemen from India named Gisaner and Demeter. Now, many people have tried to find the origins of who these 2 were. Were their names anglicized? Were they translated to Greek and then to English or to Latin? And somewhere along that road, their names have been lost completely. But these 2 chaps in 149 BC were princes who were banished from Kannauj. They had plotted to overthrow the Maharaja of Kannauj. In fact, they plotted to kill him. His people found out about it, grabbed them, and gave them 2 options. Either we execute you here and now, or you leave, never to return. Being very wise men, they chose to leave and never return. They, through a very circuitous route, found themselves in Armenia, the Armenia of antiquity, as we call it, where the Armenian king back then was very impressed with them and their level of education. So he gave them the governorship of a province called Taron, T-A-R-O-N. He gave them the governorship of that province. At the peak, there were 5,000 Hindus in Armenia. This is going back to 149 BC. 5,000 of them. All of them, in about 2 weeks' time, were wiped out by St. Gregory the Illuminator, after which he decides to name Armenia as the first Christian nation on earth. So my question before I wrap up tonight is, had Gregory not been involved, would Armenia have been the first Hindu nation on earth? And a bit of trivia for you, in sensitive times. The hand that baptized Jesus, the hand that by default began Christianity, the hand of St. John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, who baptized him in the River Jordan, that hand, the right hand of John the Baptist, is right here in Bengal in the Armenian church in Chinsura. Quite the hand that started Christianity, and we have it right here in Bengal. Now, thanks to the mismanagement and outright stupidity of various churches around the world, there are 2 right hands of John the Baptist that are circulating the globe. There's this one in Chinsura, and another one that switches between the Armenian headquarters church in Yerevan and the Vatican. But one of these 2, quite possibly, and this one is taken quite seriously, simply because it is never removed from the premises of the church. It's always kept in there. It's only brought down once a year. So if you get a chance, go along on this feast of St. John the Baptist, and they'll bring it down, and you get to see it. And that is me for today. Thank you very much indeed. If I may, can I open it up to any questions? I'll give you a quick couple of minutes. Any questions? I was told in advance somebody might have questions. Go ahead, sir. So imagine being 2 pretty senior princes. I mean, if they were plotting to overthrow the Maharaja, they would not have been a lower ranking prince. I presume, I'm guessing here, they must have been pretty senior. So we can presume or assume that when they were thrown out, they surely would not have been just the 2 princes leaving. There would have been